dun, 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 dun. Hey there, how's everybody? Welcome to Dr. Geneva Speaks Live. Today we're talking about invisible or essential, the cold truth about leading after 50. So if you've been doing good work for years, but lately you feel overlooked, talked over, or passed by, stay with me. I'm Dr. Geneva, for those I don't know, and I've raised over $100 million by making value hard to ignore. Today, I'm going to show you how to make your value easier to see so you can make your next move with a plan. So I see you in the chat, and give me a 1 if you can hear me. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whether you're joining me live or on the replay. Delighted that you're here. Yes, and let me know how the weather is where you are here in Detroit. I'm coming to you from Detroit, Michigan, and the sun is out, but it's still cold. So how are you? Good morning, Cheryl and Linda and Carrie and Miguel. So delighted that you're here. For those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, good morning. Dan Russ and I just had a fabulous conversation on leadership, self-leadership, all things leadership on his podcast, Disrupted Leadership. I'd love for you to join and look at it and watch it. Good morning, Aurelio on LinkedIn. How you doing? Detroit strong. Yes, indeed. It's so good to see everybody. Okay. So let me know what's happening. I'm just making sure all of us, if you can hear me, put a 1 in the chat. I want to make sure that everyone can hear. And also let me know what's going on in your world, in your life. We're going to be talking about today moving from invisibility to essential. And I want to tell you all, my friends on LinkedIn, I'm not sure your comments are coming through, so give us a moment. We're going to check that out because I want to. Last week when we were talking, I missed your comments. So we want to make sure that that's happening. Okay. So for those of you who've joined, and I just want to say hello again. Hey, Lily Shaw, Postmaster. Listen. So let's get into it. I want to start off with our prime time report. It's time for that. And today's report is all about hidden assets in plain sight. You know, I went looking through the research on what's really happening for workers over 50, and especially for women. And when you put these reports side by side, the pattern is hard to ignore. As you can see here, a brand new report from AARP says that about 64% of workers over 50 are still experiencing age discrimination at work. And that number has not improved in the last 2 years. At the same time, the Woman in the Workplace 2025 study shows women still account for only 30% of C-suite leaders, and the gap widens at the very top. And then here's the kicker. Analysis of global gender gap data show women over 50 can be less promoted, yet more productive than their male peers. And when you put all that together, here's the truth that I wanted to make sure you all understand. And if you're a woman leader in nonprofits, business, philanthropy, you are producing more and being promoted less. And that is how you can go from essential to invisible on paper. Even while you are carrying the load, you are doing the stuff. So I want to just let's just think about this a little more, because it's really two sides of the same coin. The side one is that you are working hard, you're steady, you get results. Like if you're in a nonprofit, you keep the programs running. If you're in a foundation, you're keeping the strategy and the funding that you're doing on track. In business, you're bringing in the clients, you're keeping the world's wheels turning. If you're in the corporate world, you're probably leading a team together and hitting the goals. That's one side of the coin. The flip side, even while you're doing all that, the system still shorts you. Less credit, less visibility, less promotion, and too often more prove it expectations. And that's what we're seeing. So I want to say this very clearly. Proving does not work the way it used to be. You know, when you were younger and 20s, 30s, 40s, just coming into whatever field you were in, that's what you needed to do. That proving, okay? But that doesn't work anymore for you if you in your 50s or 60s. Positioning does work. And so that's what the primetime report is saying today. And, you know, by the end of this conversation, I want you to know whether what's holding you back is the system or society, as I just described, or whether it's a decision you haven't made yet. Okay, so now here's the real question and the conversation for today. Why are accomplished women still stuck proving themselves when they have decades of receipts? Because after 50, the world often stops looking at your potential and starts questioning your place. Not because you've lost your ability, because people's assumptions get thrown in and society shows up, and society has some definite expectations about where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing when you're in your 50s or 60s. So today is really about changing that. That's what I want to do, not with hype, but with strategy. So let's get into it. Let's first talk about how this happens, okay? So how does a woman with real results and outcomes become invisible? I see it all the time. Women who've led teams, led organizations, built programs, raised money, navigated tough seasons at work and at home, and then they walk into a new role, a new market, or a new room, and suddenly people treat them like they starting from scratch because of their age. And so here's how it happens. Let me tell you how it happens. First, you're using old rules. That's what happens. You think, you know, if I work harder, deliver more, keep my head down, people will notice. Now that worked when you was younger, maybe 20s, 30s. And I know Many of us were socialized, I know I was, that if you keep your focus, you do good work, you get noticed. That's all you need to do. Just do the work. It don't work like that now, and it definitely does not work the same way after 50, because the rules shift and no one announces it. There's really not a playbook. Here's what the old rules really look like. You take on one more project. You say yes again. You fix the mess quietly. You do the work and assume the work will speak for itself. But listen here, women leaders out there in your 50s and 60s, let me tell you, that work does not speak for itself anymore. Not in this climate, not at this age, not as a woman. Second, the room is already reading you through a biased lens. There's a term for that. Gendered ageism. It basically means that we as women get judged for age in a way men do not. Okay. We're either too young, too old, too much, not enough. You can't win by just working harder, because we face that because we're a woman and because of our age. And third, again, these are the old rules. This is what is happening in the system. Third, we tend to describe our experience in a way that sounds like history instead of strategy. Now, this thing is huge. Many women say, well, I've been doing this for 25 years. Congratulations. But you know what? That sounds like time served. It can even sound like I'm nearing the end. And I'm telling you, we're all guilty of this. I have over 40 years in the nonprofit career, in the nonprofit world, in terms of my career. And I can't tell you how many times I'll be saying, oh, yeah, I have 40 years in the field, etc. At least that's what I used to say. I position it differently because one of the things is people look and they stop, and in some ways, it kind of suggests that you're nearing the end. See, what you want to sound like is someone who sees what's coming next. Okay? And so that's the difference. Oftentimes, tenure, how long we've been doing something, sounds like the past. It does. Wisdom, being able to see ahead. But that wisdom sounds like the future. So check this out. For example, if you're a foundation leader, do not lead with, I've been in philanthropy for 20 years. Lead with, this is a difference, I've seen what happens when funding strategy is not aligned. Here's the fix before it fails. If you run a nonprofit, do not lead with, like I used to, I've managed programs for decades. Lead with, I've led through budget cuts, staff turnover, and community pressure. Here's what keeps mission-driven work steady. If you're in business or in the corporate world, do not lead with, or, running your own business. Do not lead with, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. Lead with, I know how to grow revenue without burning myself out. Here's the model I use. Corporate world, Hey, you don't have to tell people I've been in this industry for years. You can tell them I've led change and kept teams performing through it. Here's what works. Same woman, same experience, different power. Okay? And so so I really want that to sink in. But let me make sure. Do you, if you understand the contrast that I'm making, please give me a yes in the chat. So when you combine those old rules I talked about, a bias lens, a weak framing, the old guard, the old ways we're looking at, when you combine all of those things, we become invisible. That's how we can become invisible. Do you understand? And I want you to hear this. It's not because you are not capable. It's because people are not being forced to see you clearly. And you need to position yourself so that you are seen clearly. Now, if you stay in this trap, and it is one, you can get exhausted. You work harder for less credit. And that's not sustainable. You burn yourself out. You're going to miss opportunities because when they see you as solid, but not essential, you do not get the high stakes projects. You do not get invited into the right rooms. You get handed the work, but not the spotlight. And eventually you start second guessing yourself. You start asking, is it me? You start shrinking, even if you do not mean to. This is the trap. And many women do not realize that they're in it until they're worn down. And I've been there. That's the experience I know that I've had. And there are probably many of you out there who have that same experience. And so if you are feeling that invisible wall, we can fix it. It can be fixed. The Let's Talk Strategy session that I have which is not coaching. It's for accomplished women who are done circling and need to decide their next move. And in our session, we actually do a cold truth audit on how you're showing up and build a 90-day plan to make sure that your next move is clear and strong. So if you're interested in that kind of decision session with me, drop me a note in the DMs if you're on LinkedIn. And then there's also a QR code and a link in the description. But before you book, before we talk, you really need to understand the 3 shifts that separate invisible from essential. And so that's what I want to talk about now, and want you to realize that these shifts are critical to move from invisibility to being essential. The first shift is the hardest because it asks you to stop doing what got you here. Here's the problem. Many women are still operating like they're building a resume when they were 30, but you ain't 30. You do not have to prove potential. You already have proof. Now, when you were younger, proving made sense. You needed experience, you needed chances, you needed to show you could deliver. But after, you're 15, 20, 25, 30 years, proving turns into a trap because the more you prove, the more people expect you to carry things. So here's the shift. Stop trying to prove you are still relevant. Start positioning your wisdom as the advantage. Claim it. Show up. Show up. I am relevant. I am relevant. I have the proof. Okay. And so let me translate that word positioning, because sometimes that word can sound a little too fancy, or a little too, what you talking about? And positioning really means you say the same thing that makes people understand your value fast. Okay? And so again, back to our example of, instead of I've been doing this for 20 years, say I've seen and led this kind of problem before, and here is what happens next if we do nothing. Do you see? Because you're putting your judgment, your wisdom, your experience out there in terms of what you know, what you've achieved, and you know what's up ahead and around the corner. And so instead of listing tasks, I manage budgets, staffs, and programs. Talk about outcomes. I stabilized a team, improved results, and protected the mission under pressure. You see the difference? Instead of hoping people will notice, you name the thing that you bring. And I'm not talking about in a, loud, boisterous way. I'm just talking about being clear. And that's what I mean about by leverage. Leverage does not mean to work harder. It means you use what you already know to get a better result with less struggle. And most women don't need more options. They need one clear decision they can stand behind and understand what their assets are, what their leverage is. And that's what we can build together, a simple positioning statement that sounds like you and lands with power. Okay. The second shift that's so important for you to understand that matters in this invisibility to essential discussion is moving from being nice to being clear and non-negotiable. That's shift two. A lot of women over 50 get punished for competence. You deliver results, you hold a standard, and suddenly you call difficult. Meanwhile, a man gets called strong. So the shift is not to become harsh. The shift is to become clear. Stop asking for permission to take up space. Start showing up like you belong in the room, because you know what you do. So here is what non-negotiable means. What I mean when I say that. It means you stop hinting and start naming. So let me give you an example. Instead of, I'm sorry, but I can't take one more thing on my plate. Say, my plate is full. If you want me to take this on, we need to decide what comes off. Instead of, I'm happy to help, say, I can help. Here's the deal. Here's the timeline. Here's what I need. And instead of just hoping people see your value, you say it plainly. And this is where people get stuck on that phrase, ROI, return on investment. And return on investment, really, the simple what it is it improves things because you are involved. You improve things because you're involved, because you're in the room. And so, it can sound like, well, when I took over, turnover dropped. When I came in, the project stopped drifting. When I led this, funding stabilized. When I coached this team, results went up. When I stepped in, the confusion cleared. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is the ROI as I'm talking, the return on investment that I'm talking about. It's the results that people can feel because of your presence. They can feel it, they can see it. When you stepped into the room, when you went into the situation, things changed. And so describing that and naming that is the ROI that people get. It's the results people can feel by your presence, by your involvement, by your engagement. And, I learned a lot of this in my own, I've raised over $100 million, and I did not do it by being the best worker in the room. I did it by being clear about value and impact. I learned to say, here is what changes when we do this. Here is what will make a difference when you invest in. So it's not just about the numbers or the statistics, but what changes as a result of your involvement. And you can do the same. You do the same. It's just a mind shift and just a change in the language. And some of us, I know I did, starting out, I would struggle to, it's talk about those things and say my value without apologizing. And I don't do that anymore. I've learned how to be able to identify value and speak it. And that's what we build together in 90 minutes in my Let's Talk Strategy sessions. The third shift that I want you to understand in this conversation about moving from being invisible to being essential, and how critical it is for us as women over 50 in leadership roles to be aware of, is this shift that sometimes is very hard. It's a hard truth. Here's what we know: 2 in 3 workers over 50 are experiencing age bias, then waiting for the system to suddenly become fair. That's a losing strategy. So here's the shift that I'm talking about is stop waiting to be chosen. Stop building, stop saying there and say, well, I'm waiting for, or I know I'm going to get noticed for this if I do X, Y. Stop all that. Start building your own stuff, your own lane where your experience is the asset. And so, you become your own architect. And when I say architecting your own lane, that does not mean starting a business. It doesn't. It can mean several things. Creating a role that fits your strengths, moving into fractional leadership or consulting, taking board work seriously and using it as a platform, building a portfolio career, giving a small offer on something that solves one clear problem, leading where your wisdom is most needed. Any of that. And here's the key question. You ask yourself, well, where am I essential? Not where you fit, where you're needed, where you can bring value, where you can bring that impact. And that is the key thing to you creating your opportunities. Now, you don't have to answer that alone. We can work together to figure that out and for you to make a decision. And oftentimes making the decision, it can be scary. Okay. But looking at, here's the problem, here's what it costs, here's what it stays if it's a mess, if you keep it a mess, what are the changes you need? Those are the kinds of things, like if you were starting a business, you'd want to look at. If you're in the nonprofit world, programs might be slipping because, staff is being stretched and overworked. You know what the cost is, the outcomes drop, trust erodes. And here's what changes when you lead. You can actually stabilize your team and protect the results. And if you're in the corporate world, oftentimes teams are burned out and the performance is uneven. And the cost is turnover rises and, you lose the results. But when you lead, you can execute with focus and keep the talent. And so these examples of foundations, nonprofit, being in business, we know what the problems are. We can see them. We see the cost. We need to understand what are the changes we can create when we lead. That is architecting your lane, you being the designer of what you do. Okay? You understand the problem, clear value, clear move, your next move. Okay? And, oftentimes leaders get stuck here because we can see the lane, but we're not sure how to actually build it. So here's the cold truth. After 50, you're either becoming invisible, or becoming essential. There's no middle ground. The market makes that choice every day. In promotions that don't come, in rooms you're not invited into, and changes that you see going to perhaps someone younger, unless you force a different outcome. The women who become essential make these shifts that I talked about. They stop proving and start positioning. They stop doing more and start being seen by what they already know. They stop shrinking and start being clear. They set boundaries, name value, and refuse to apologize for competence. They stop waiting and start building their next. They design roles and platforms, and work fits their wisdom, and they do it with a plan. That's all there. And that's why I created the Let's Talk strategy, because it's the fastest way out of indecision. Here's how it works. First, we get clear on the real decision you're avoiding, not the surface problem, the actual choice that's been keeping you stuck. Then I give you a cold truth read on how you're positioned right now. What's helping you? What's working against you? And this is where decades of leadership experience matter. And third, we decide your next move and map the first 90 days so you know exactly what to do next. No circling, no guessing. And so if you're still thinking instead of deciding, that's the signal. If you're still thinking about what to do 6 months from now, ask yourself, what did hesitation cost me? So you want to turn your experience into your advantage. And so let's talk about that. Let's have a decision session so that you can stop guessing and start moving. Because how that makes a decision, how that makes an impact, the importance of that is that if you're a woman leader in your 50s and 60s, you have so much more to give, to create, to make happen, to leave legacy for. And so a time waster is that circling on that decision. And so it becomes expensive for you, and we waste time in that. So I want you to make sure that you're making those decisions that create your next, that keeps you feeling joy and impactful and all those kinds of good things that you want to see in your life and career. So that's it for today's conversation. And now, whatever questions you might have, let's talk about that. Uh, yes, yes, yes. Thank you. I see we have some number of comments about how people felt and what they were saying. Let me say good morning to Esther and Dr. Pierre mwah, from Dallas. Nidra, how are you, my favorite AI consultant? And good to see you. And thank you for joining. And there's so many of you on TikTok who are, yes, and asking, yes, that's right. We have some questions about, or comments really, about how important it is to stop circling and to make those decisions. Yes, let's make those decisions. And that's what we can do together. I can help you get to the decision perhaps you've been avoiding or you're stuck on. Okay, so I'm going to see you next week. Next week, we are going to be talking about how, these astounding statistics that we're seeing about women who are being displaced from the workforce, and what are the decisions you need to make if you happen to be one of them, or if you're ready to make your next move or career change, and you've come to that point, what it is that you can do about that, about your next move and the decisions that you need to make. Great being with you. I'll see you next week.